Welcome everyone to the Birchfield Penny Arts Center Book Club at the Center. Our book club, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, started way back in 2011 when a lovely docent, Jane Roubaix, who is no longer with us, came up with the idea that we should all read the works that Charles Birchfield read. And that's how we got started, by reading the books that Charles Birchfield read. We quickly made a pivot to reading works written by authors who live in our region, which totally supports the mission of the Birchfield Penny Arts Center to support the incredible and varied and vast number of talented people like tonight's featured author, Olga. And so we did that. Since that time, we have welcomed over 100 authors to this book club. The authors are always present with us. Sometimes they Zoom in. We've had authors from all over the place, all over the world, from all parts of Europe and other parts within the United States. But we're always extra excited when they can be present with us, like Olga is tonight. So thank you so much, Olga, for being here. I'm going to first ask Michaela to explain the mechanics of the evening, and then I'm going to introduce Miss Olga Karmen.
Sure. So as I mentioned, this is being recorded, so this will go on our YouTube page. For everyone who's on Zoom, after Olga's done presenting and reading, if you have questions, just unmute and ask her yourself, or you can use the chat. That's it.
All righty. So Olga Karmen was born in Havana, Cuba, as I'm sure all of you know, in 1940. In November of 1960, she left her country alone on the ship Guadalupe. Olga was barely 20 years old when she headed off to a marriage and a wedding in a church where she knew no one, in a country where you almost knew no one. When her ship left Havana, the Cuban Revolution had been in power for not quite 2 years. And Olga was only halfway through her studies to become a clinical psychologist when suddenly her life was severed. Yet Olga attended Connecticut College and Harvard University, where she earned a PhD in Latin American literature. After moving to Buffalo in 1976, she taught briefly Spanish at the Nichols School, and then joined the DeYuval College faculty, where she spent 27 years. And to quote Olga, "I spent 27 years at a place I loved." While at DeYuval, Olga conducted a study on high school dropouts in New York State's Hispanic community for then Governor Mario Cuomo. As a result of the dismal information that her research revealed, she established a mentoring program that paired DeYuval minority students with their counterparts in local high schools. When a colleague commented, "You know, Olga, you can't save them all," she said, "What if it was your daughter I was trying to save? Would you feel that same way?" Of course, she said no, right? Or was she speechless?
Speechless.
The mentoring program, the college close association with Buffalo's West Side, and the bonding she and her Latino students formed turned the Spanish professor into a Hispanic community activist. Olga climbed onto porches, she walked up stairways, knocked on endless numbers of doors to register Hispanic vote. She campaigned for the man who was to become the first Latino city court judge. "I rode shotgun all over the West Side," this is a direct quote, "with a bullhorn. Vote for Raul Figueroa." I hope I said that correctly. On Victory Night, she celebrated with her colleagues on Delaware Avenue. One of her coworkers and Olga sat on the hood of her car and drank champagne from paper cups. In addition to Olga's memoir, Scatter My Ashes Over Havana, she published 2 books of poetry, Adios and Border Crossing. Her poems can be found on a mural outside of the Allen Hospital subway stop and in publication, The Nation and the New Republic. She has read her poems and her beautiful memoir at countless universities across the nation. Composer William Ortiz composed music for 3 of her poems. These were performed at SUNY Fredonia. In Olga's words, I bore witness to a pivotal moment in Cuba's history and to a time when Hispanics in the United States began to form a movement. I had to tell my story, and quite a story it was. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So thank you, Olga. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, Mary.
Being with
I'm
us.
glad to be here.
Would you like your slides up? Your slides.
Sure. Let's put the first one in. Oh, yeah, that would be great. Like right here. Right here. I love it.
Oh,
Isn't she beautiful?
great picture.
It is a great photograph.
I think you got the verb tense wrong.
No, you're beautiful then and you're beautiful now.
So are you sailing the boat or just?
Sailing, yeah.
Yeah, it does look like.
Are we ready? Yeah. When Scatter My Ashes over Havana begins, the Cuban Revolution has been in power for almost 2 years. What jubilation that January 1st of 1959, when victory was announced on the radio and on TV and at home, my mother, my father, my brother and I stood up, and with our hands to our hearts, we sang the Cuban national anthem. No more dictatorship, no more Batista torturers, no more suitcases full of money leaving Cuba, no more giveaways to Americans who own the casinos now. I believed in Fidel, in the revolution. I had gone to throw flowers at him when he entered Havana, sitting rather on a tank. But of course, I went back home and I still had the flowers because I was so nervous that I forgot to throw them. But at any rate, they were there. And he was headed toward his first speech in Havana. He was followed by an ocean of his soldiers, rebels, rebeldes. They formed the Ejército Rebelde. And all were wearing olive green uniforms. Try to remember that color. Fidel, 33 years old, next day the posters said, big posters, 33 years old, the age of Christ. That gives you an idea. La edad de Cristo, 33 años. 3 months later, I could read the future of our nation, although I was only 18 years old. Newspapers, we had 6 of them in Havana that I can recall and name. 6 of them were shut down. Businesses were taken over in the dark of night. Committees for the defense of the revolution were started in every single block of every single neighborhood. Fidel, 4-hour and 5-hour speeches taught me history, taught me politics. The man is a genius, and I learned a lot from him. Unfortunately, he coined a word, gusano, which means worm. Also feminine can be gusana. Gusanos were the ones, the counter-revolutionaries in the city and in the country who were eating inside the revolution, trying to bring it down. Those were the gusanos. Try to remember that word as well. My final break with Fidel came at the outdoor speech in front of the presidential palace, where there were tens of thousands of us. I was interpreting for an American journalist. After the usual diatribe against the United States, Fidel informed us, quote, "They want us to have elections. Why? because they want to destabilize. Is that how you say it? Destabilize?
Yeah.
They want to destabilize the revolution. And I ask you, the people, and then he made a long pause. Do we need elections? There was a wave of no, 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 no. And his last words were, the people have voted. And here is Karamayash's first page. I am about to enter the American embassy in Havana to get a visa to go to the United States to get married. And I'll read a little bit about that moment. The person who was going to let me in was a classmate. My high school principal was American, and he had connections in the embassy. Her name was Ali Sophie. Please, please be there, Ali Sophie. Please be there. I rushed past the long queue in front of the American embassy, wanting to be invisible. I kept my eyes forward, trying to let on that I was about to climb the grass-covered rise and make a dash for the side door for Ali Sophie. All you have to do, our principal had said, is knock on the side door at 10 o'clock. She'll be there. I didn't quite believe him. A blur of freckles and white blonde hair. Ali Sophie yanked me inside. Corre, run. Off we flew, just as we had on the school basketball court. We were dodging embassy workers who were running with stacks of folders in their arms and calling out to each other in English. Take the back stairs, get rid of those. The afternoon flight, diplomatic pouch. Why are they hurrying? What's the rush? Then it hit me as hard as newsprint. Cuba se hunde. Cuba is sinking. But what about our nickname? The island made of cork. That used to be our talisman. And then on we go to the day I left. I left by ship, as you said. The ship was called Guadalupe. And my grandmother, Mama, Angelica, my father and my mother drove me to the harbor. Before I knew what was happening, I was all by myself inside the passenger area, and a hard-faced, muscle-bound militia woman in olive green uniform and black lace-up books was ordering, "Come with me." Swimming before my eyes was a sea of olive green, the revolution's regulation color. Once upon a time, right before the revolution, I had believed in that color, olive green. Olive green had stood for victory. Oh, how I had believed with all my heart. Take off your clothes. She had stepped inside the cubicle with me. I heard her, but the simple words were unintelligible. I repeat, take everything off. Todo. I took off the black travel suit that mother had sewn for me out of my grandfather's tuxedo, and sensing the woman's impatience, I left it in a heap on the dusty floor. Separate your legs. Jump up and down with your arms raised over your head. I was naked, jumping and choking with rage. From the next cubicle came a scuffle, then wailing. A passenger had been caught trying to smuggle jewels inside her beehive hairdo. What if mother and father have hidden something inside my luggage? But wait, how can I think such thoughts? This is what the revolution has done. We don't trust even our own family. The ship pulled out, and I'm lost, but I will find my way. The ship pulled away from the mooring. Here we go. The Guadalupe had begun to shudder and back out of her mooring. To my left, Havana, part of my own silhouette. Right in front of me, father, mother, Mama Angelica. They were leaving the dock at a run. Why? Look at them rushing away. How little they must love me. What can I expect? I'm abandoning them. But when the ship reached the mouth of the harbor, I could see 3 forlorn figures on the esplanade that we called La Punta. Remember that name, La Punta. Just across from the Morro Castle. There stood my loved ones, waiting for the Guadalupe, each waving a white handkerchief. Mother, father, Mama Angelica, here I am, over here on the deck. How small you look, how frail, waving those handkerchiefs. I wish you wouldn't do that. Stop doing that. I looked down at the ocean, black and bossy. It seemed to be yelling up to me, jump. Glancing back at the shore, I thought I saw myself standing next to them, a phantom of myself, standing with the 3 figures waving back at me, seeming as forlorn as the others. Which one was I? The rootless one? The rootless one on the ship? Or the heavy-hearted ghost on solid ground? The figures turned to haze and the coastline became a haze. My eyes began to well up until an urgent voice inside me said, don't cry. There's nobody here to hold you. If you start to cry, you'll never stop. This 20-year-old, stepped up to the bar and ordered un whiskey. and the bartender asked, black or red? What do I know? So I just, black. A man in starched whites, no more olive green, thank God, was toasting me. He was the purser. Do you say purser or
Yeah.
bursar?
I think purser.
He was the purser.
The British might say do why not?
Yeah, so he was a purser. He looked like my father, actually. And he toasted me, salud, salud. He was from Spain. He had a beautiful accent, etc. And then I went to my cabin. All I owned in the world was a trousseau in my cardboard suitcases. I fled back to the stateroom and buried my face inside the layers of vaporous nightgowns, peach, baby blue, white for the wedding night, and a frightening, provocative black one with a tiny baby blue bow. A gentle knock at the stateroom door broke my reverie. Before I could ask, who is it? The purser in starched whites had let himself in. He secured the lock, stretched out on my bed, unfastened his belt, took me by the hand and said, lie down, pulling me to him. The ship's engines were loud. Even if my throat could open, who would hear me? But then, from a strength I hadn't known I had, I decided, no, no, no. I held his hand tight and started telling him stories. Did you read about Herbert Matthews? I had a crush on Camilo Cienfuegos. My hero is Camilo. I think Fidel had him killed, but we're not sure. On and on. I asked him tenderly, did you know that that Batista had straight pliers for pulling out fingernails? A metal scoop for eyeballs, and another one for crushing testicles. I actually saw these on display. On and on, on and on and on. I saved myself a phrase at a time. A phrase at a time. He gave up and left.
Arabian Nights. Other one night.
That was my first moment alone in the world.
Yeah.
And then comes the marriage. The marriage was unhappy, an unhappy marriage, a very unhappy marriage. One little anecdote should serve, although there are more moments. On a Sunday afternoon, we lived now in the middle of nowhere. My brother came to visit from California and said, you live in el culo del mundo. You live in the
That's worse.
of the world. So here we are in North Stonington, which I couldn't pronounce, by the way. Can you pronounce it? North Stonington. At any rate, on a Sunday afternoon during TV football, my husband, having gone into the kitchen to freshen his drink, called out to me. As soon as I was next to him, he dragged his index finger across the counter, looked at it and said, it's greasy. Maybe it's because you're Cuban or something. I looked down at the floor, saying nothing. On Monday, I registered for a course at Connecticut College. English literature, 3 hours a week. I knew my salvation would be studying, going back to school. I didn't know about child support, or we had a daughter. I didn't know those things. I thought it all depended on me, which is maybe a good thing. And I went to Connecticut College, and the man there told me how much it cost, and I thought he was telling me the time, but I looked at the clock and it was 12:30. So that was the tuition that he was telling me about. But I got in. He accepted my credits, and I met the star, Mackie Jarrell, the great English literature professor. Of course, you have to understand that when Mackie Jarrell announced that there would be papers, I turned around and I asked the student, what is a paper? And when she said the books would be on reserve, nothing. I didn't know anything. But when Mackie started to read Beowulf, and when she started to read Chaucer, I thought I would faint. I went downstairs to the bookstore and bought a record of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, the prologue. And there's somebody here who can recite the prologue with me. Are you ready?
Yeah.
When that April with the shore sota, the drust of March hath pierced to the rota, and bathed every vein, in which liquor engendered is the fluor. There we go.
We just learned that we both knew that like
3 months ago.
Well,
Yeah.
I was sitting on the floor. I had put Carla down for her nap, and there I was, Wanda opera, repeating what the record was saying. Wanda opera with the shoes salt. And I thought, someday I'm going to sound like Mackie. Someday I'm going to make melodia like those little birds in the prologue. I was immensely happy. But then there were difficulties. For example, I live, say, 20 miles away from Connecticut College. And I found out when I went to the library that books on reserve meant you couldn't take them out. Most students, all students really back then, I was, and out of, from another planet with my cheap coat and my baby biscuits inside the pocket. There weren't many non-traditional students. So I went and they said, well, you can't take it out because it's reserved. So that's what reserve meant. And the students lived on campus. And of course they went there, sat there and read. So I begged, and this was the arrangement. I would come from North Stonington when the library was closing, pick up the book, take it back to North Stonington, read all night, come back before the library, when the library was opening, return the book and go back home. That's 80 miles. When you have no choice, things are very easy. You just do them. And so that's what happened. And then a mentor found me. Her name was Argyle, like the socks, Argyle. And I was her student. And I was studying to be a Spanish teacher in high school. I said, quick, get out of here, get your title, go work, make money. And she said to me, I see you're going to be a high school student, but why don't you want to be a college professor? Like me, she said. Well, imagine, she helped me fill out forms, applications to Harvard, Yale, UConn, in case the others didn't take me. And then she said, here, apply for this fellowship. It's a Woodrow Wilson fellowship. I filled out everything. And Woodrow Wilson Fellowship invited me to go to New York to be interviewed. Imagine the ride to New York in a Mercedes. The person driving is the Italian professor at Connecticut College. Next to her is the other candidate. And in back, Olga. I knew I was doomed. So we got to New York, we go into the beautiful, beautiful building. And I remember the floor had beautiful Oriental rugs and the fireplace was burning and there were glasses and these men in tweeds. I tell you, it was like a movie. And then one of them lifted up a glass ashtray. And he said to me, we understand your honors thesis is on poet Antonio Machado from Spain. Describe this ashtray, the way Antonio Machado would describe this ashtray. Well, the skies opened. I mean, I had been devoted to Machado for months and I knew his vocabulary. So I began using his words and I made like this beautiful filigreed picture out of words. Okay. We headed back to the turnpike, Mass Pike, Connecticut. And I was sure that nothing will come of this. Come on. And furthermore, I had insulted Machado's memory by reciting. I mean, who am I to be saying this ashtray es como Leonor, los ojos de Leonor? Come on. Well, a few weeks later, I get a phone call from a neighbor her name is Judy. How can I forget? And she said, "Hey, you're in the New London Times." I said, "Why? I didn't know that." She said, "Yeah, you won a prize, you won a scholarship." And then there was a long pause, and she said, "That's funny, you don't look that smart."
You don't look that.
I love those words. I was in like Flint, and I didn't look smart, although I was tempted to go and look in the mirror and see, how do I really look? It's funny, you don't look that smart. At any rate,
Smarter than you look.
I think you're just so beautiful. She thought you can't have everything.
well, I was a sad woman then. I don't think I was beautiful. At any rate, so there I was. Then Harvard called, ding, ding. This is Professor so-and-so, and Professor Marichal is here, and Professor so-and-so. We're glad you're coming to Harvard, but we know you have a 2-year-old daughter. We'd like you to know that Harvard doesn't work around babysitter schedules. Why didn't I have a tape recorder? And of course I said, no. Of course. And of course, I panicked. But at any rate, the day came when I went to Harvard, and I drove to Harvard. And I want you to know what it was like to be in that Volkswagen driving by the Charles, headed to visit Harvard. At the wheel of my vintage electric blue VW Beetle, I wondered out loud, am I still young? Or has life slowed me down as it has the Charles, which is, as you know, it's a very sinewy river. Young, I told myself, and stepped on the gas, leaning into the curbs. I was 26, and the 60s were in full flower, deja vu all over again. But placards of Che Guevara and Fidel Castro right at Harvard. But there was another me, and I knew her well. Tired, grim, weighted down with responsibility, about to dismantle a marriage and make a 3-year-old suffer. My financial future was bleak, and now I must secretly search for a cheap apartment in an unfamiliar city. The red brick bridges over the Charles came into view and took my breath away. Students were walking along the banks or pedaling 10-speed bicycles in bright summer jerseys that looked like banners in the wind. A shell sped by with a tiny coxswain yelling into his tiny microphone. A dog leapt for a frisbee and landed on a picnic. On the other bank, sycamores glowing on their mottled bark. The walk around Cambridge was my timid approach to the tall iron gates separating Harvard Yard from the rest of the universe. When finally I dared to cross the threshold, the traffic became inaudible. A sudden hush. I was in the yard. How serene, how intimate was the shade, how majestic were the old trees. Out of the silence rose a hum. It was the blood running through my temples and announcing my resurrection. I'd come back from the dead. The blood music was the music of the living. Of course, well, I'd like to jump a little bit and just tell you a little bit of what I think Harvard gave me. It's very short. I was walking home. I used to walk home after class and look for my car. And this is what that vision that I had. Some afternoons driving home along the banks of the Charles and still brimming with what Professor Lila had said in class, I imagined a walled-in patio where Saint Teresa, Saint John of the Cross, and Federico Garcia Lorca walked round and round, reciting to each other, the Lord is among your cooking pots, Saint Teresa used to say. And Garcia Lorca spoke with his hands, of course, as he described Antoñito, the jasmine and olive-skinned gypsy with carnations in his voice. Come join us, they said to me. Come join us. And I entered the circle to find a homeland where not even Fidel could turn me away. Thank you, Harvard. Of course, there was still the marriage. I was married and I had to tell my husband that I wanted a separation. He collected guns. That was his hobby, shooting. He built nuclear subs. So this evening, when I was going to tell him, after Carla was asleep, I informed my husband that we would be separating in some way. His macho blood up. He opened the kitchen drawer, looked around for something, didn't find it, reached under the sink, and before I could get out of the way, he'd emptied the garbage can on my head. If you leave me, I'll kill you. With the wet coffee grounds sticking to my face and hair, I understood clearly that I might die. Everything inside me begged, no, not now. I can't die now. I'm almost there. Slowly, I backed away, got out of the front door and ran to my neighbor's house. Rita shampooed my hair and took care of me. And we waited till the house was completely dark. I went back. I opened the door. It was really dark. At the top of the stairs, he was sitting and he said, I will kill you. You can't imagine. Well, I think you can. Then came the time to leave, and that was cumbersome, as you can imagine. But I became an American in the making of all this. How did I become an American? Well, first of all, let me tell you, I was poor. I don't think I had been poor before. Carla and I lived on Meat Plus. And perhaps you don't know what, I don't even know if that exists anymore. Meat Plus is a vegetable product that replaces meat. Whenever she wanted a cereal that was expensive, like Lucky Charms or a Hostess cupcake, I would get angry and say, no, put that away. And then I would feel guilty. And on Saturdays, I'd go to the public market, the Quincy market. at late in the afternoon after everything was sold and everything was cheap then. And I would buy the remainders. But I was happy there. I was happy there, listening to the produce vendors cry out, "Help anyone here?" Just 10 steps away was Paul Revere's statue in front of Old North Church, where Longfellow's hero proclaimed, "One if by land, two if by sea." Among push carts and shoppers, into history I went. Rather than being a dislocated Cuban, I was an American on hallowed ground. It scarcely mattered that the ground was buried under sawdust, cabbage leaves, mangled beets, and carrot tops. So that was the first transformation. If we have to finish, then we finish.
We're fine. We're fine.
Okay, all right.
Share about
We don't
your-
have to, you know. So becoming an American, and then, of course, I became a Hispanic. Wait. Okay, when I came to the United States, there were no Hispanics and Puerto Rican literature didn't exist and nothing. It was blank. Moved to Buffalo. Of course, they wouldn't hire me because nobody was hiring. Buffalo was sinking in 1976. I graduated on the year of the bicentennial. How American is that? And I came and nobody would hire me. They'd hang up on me. I said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I'm a native." And then Nichols hired me. And after 3 years, I just, it was too much. I couldn't do this. So I quit. And I found in the newspaper, no, I found in the yellow pages, I called every university, the UVille needed somebody. And I thought, the UVille, what is that? So this uppity Harvard graduate is going to a college whose name she can't even pronounce, and nobody knows. If you tell them you teach at DU, they say, "Could you spell that?" Or they call it Duville. I love it, Duville. Well, they hired me to teach Hispanic students who were going to be teachers, English and also Spanish for the professions, all kinds of courses. And I became one with them. I was in a new orbit, in a new world. I mean, when I saw who my students were, Milagros, Miguel, Domingo, Maria Cristina, those were the names in my classroom registry. And the men smelled like the important men in my life. They wore cologne. Like my father, like my uncle, like my boyfriend, Evelio. And the women students, oh my goodness, meticulously dressed, smelled of brillantine, and flowery perfumes, except for the two Pentecostals, Elsie and Bruni, who is now my pharmacist at Rite Aid. This wasn't Cambridge, it was Havana. Was I one of them? Would they even accept me? Well, they did. And I said at the end of all this, I felt I wouldn't have traded DU for a position at Radcliffe or Wellesley or any place of that kind. And I started a mentoring program, by the way. I had to. Okay, on we go. So I'm now Hispanic, and this wonderful man, my student, Raul Rusi, some of you may have known him. See, of course. Raul Rusi was the first Puerto Rican policeman for the Buffalo police. Raul was my student. He came into my class. He was wonderful. He loved Borges. Of course, it was in Spanish. He loved Borges because deep down, Borges was a gaucho. Borges wanted to be a gaucho. And Raul was a gaucho policeman. And so he loved his stories. And so one day after class, Raul comes up to me. He was maybe in his 40s. He came up to me and said, so what do you do after class? And I thought, he's hitting on me. Now what do I do? So what do you do after class? I said, well, I go home. I have a family. He said, no. What do you do? I mean, what do you do for the Hispanic community? What do you do after class? And I said, I teach you. I teach you. And he said, you get paid for that. What do you do that you don't get paid for? Those are the questions that change the course of your life. I became a community activist. That's when I had the bullhorn. I climbed everywhere to get people to register. They were Puerto Ricans. They were Americans, and then to vote. And then we had the elections. And then Raul Figueroa, another Raul, he won. He was the first Hispanic judge in city court, and he became my friend. And we have to finish pretty soon. The return to Havana. It took only 36 years to go back home because of all the prohibitions. I left via Toronto illegally, and I thought, this is worth it. If they put me in jail, I have to go. I have to get myself whole again, know where I came from. Who am I? Who was the one who was left behind, the ghost there standing by the Malecón when my ship left? I had to go back. I went back, and this was the view from the airplane at night. Black. The city was black. Havana used to be the city of lights. Nightclubs, casinos, people just in cars driving around. I remember there was a big luminous sign of a Jansen swimmer that would go up, and then she'd jump in the water, and then she'd swim, and then she'd come up and jump again. And we thought she would be there forever. Nothing would ever change. The Jansen swimmer would always be there, jumping and coming back. Dark. When we got to the airport, they wouldn't let me in. Remember, this was the beginning of people going back who were Cuban. So when I went,
What year?
it was 1996. Yes, 36 years. 1996. They wouldn't let me in. The woman said, sit back there by the door. And there were people coming in, passenger from every country, telling me, get the hell out of the way, in every language. Really not nice. And because I was obviously impeding their progress. And I went up again, and I said, look, I have a visa. And they said, well, your visa is over there in Información. But you can't go to Información unless you have a visa. Okay. I spent the night at the airport, slept on 3 metal chairs. And I asked myself, is this what coming back home means? The next morning, people started coming in, and my person who was supposed to have had my visa showed up, bailed me out, and took me to my hotel. And I want you to know what it was like to be in my hotel. This is pretty much the end. Looking out the window of the hotel room. And excuse me while I find the page. I had done such a good job with all these yellow things. Um, so this is what was like looking out the window. Yes. Uh, you have to think, my window looked over the Malecón, the seawall, looked over the harbor, which I had left from, looked over La Punta, which I refused to look at because that's the last thing I had seen. I didn't. And this is just a short paragraph. There's something tender about the ocean breeze blowing out the hotel room curtains. My skin is a lung, inhaling, exhaling. Our Father who art in heaven, give us this day our daily seed. 5 floors below are almond blossoms and tiled terraces, ocean light, shadows playing on each beloved surface. All parts of Havana are breathing in unison. I feel the city's body pulse. My own body loosens as if someone had untied a bow that was holding it too tightly. Ego te absolvo, God whispers in Latin. I always thought he spoke Latin. Ego te absolvo. I forgive all your trespasses. From 50 years away, a girl's voice downstairs is calling, Sal a jugar, come out and play. Hurry up, apúrate, come out and play.
Oh.
Guess who that was? And then, how many minutes?
You are fine, just, we're
Okay.
here till 8.
Oh, all right.
Well, we have questions for you.
No, just a little bit. All right, so my first going out was to go to my grandmother and Mama Angelica's house. I could walk from the hotel. Okay, so this was the rude awakening. This was the rude awakening. I saw what Havana had become. How simple this is to walk to her house. Over to the right is Tio Miguel's apartment. Just ahead on Linea is Tia Maria's White House. To the right and left are the Grand Dames, El Vedado's old mansions. What happened to them? They are disfigured, pockmarked, with chunks of plaster collapsed on destitute flower beds. Metal rods are sticking out of cracked walls. Electrical wires dangle in space. Porches are propped with wood planks. Mounds of rubble rise beneath cracked balustrades. Don't look. Don't stare. These people standing around live here. If they see you staring, they'll see their ruins with fresh eyes, and they'll know. Breathe. Run. Don't stop again. Run all the way to number 162. And then I went into my grandmother's house, and I don't have time to read that. But that was sort of Buffalo. Havana gave me a vision of heaven and a vision of hell. Heaven, how incredibly beautiful the old Havana was. I was too young to know. What are you in high school and they're taking you on a tour? It's hot. The bus, of course, doesn't have air conditioning. And you're saying, caramba, give me the lipstick, get us out of here. And there are these gorgeous Baroque buildings. And I mean, I saw it afresh. That was heaven. And then came hell, which I already read a little bit about. Suddenly, when I'm telling myself I'm ready to go home, I want to leave, this is too much. I'm telling myself that as a shirtless man rushes up to us, two friends, no escaping him, and stands inches from my face, demanding to know who I am and why am I carrying a notebook? Am I a government official? I explain I'm visiting from the United States and writing down everything so I don't forget. He grabs me by the wrist. Well then, follow me, sígame. And he climbs over the rubble on the stairs up to the second floor where he points at walls and ceilings. Write down everything you see. Look at the holes in the walls. Look at the roof. See the sky? Next rainstorm, this roof is coming down. Then they'll haul us away to a compound where they pen the homeless like animals. Write that in your notebook. Tell them all this when you go back. He looked over my shoulder to make sure I was writing. The sun was suffocating. I was ready to go home. I walked to my new friend's house and told them, this is goodbye. I'm leaving tomorrow. We'll pick you up at, no, you're not picking me up at the hotel. You know that's against the law to pick people up at the hotel. I'm just going tomorrow. And then something happened that made me feel whole. Something so simple. I would call it pedestrian, except it would be a pun. I was walking on a sidewalk, and there were women walking behind there, and they were wearing chancletas, which are like, Jorge, what are they?
Flip-flops?
Sandals.
Flip-flops
Sandals.
made of wood.
Mhm.
And I could hear them going clack, 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 clack behind me. And then I realized, hey, mine are going clack, clack, clack too. And they walked by and they didn't even look at me. And I thought, they don't look at me because I'm a fish in the same fishbowl. I'm like, I am them. They are me. I am they. Clack, clack, clack. Clack, clack, clack. And I walk up to the street light, to the traffic light, and I look back. I look back and I see myself walking towards me, walking into me, and becoming me. And I'm not crying because I forgot my Kleenex. The next day, time to leave. I'm going to get a taxi. My friends against the law are standing there with the car. Why are you here? You can't get in the car. All right. Get in the car. We start out. They turn the wrong way. I said to them, that's not the way to the airport. You're going left. You're going toward the ocean. They said, we're taking you back to La Punta. We're taking you back. I said, no, you're not. You can't take control of my life. I don't want to go there. We're taking you.
Wow.
And so we went. There was a storm. It was raining. The ocean was against the Malecón. They opened the door. One of them shoved me out. The other one held the door open because the wind was blowing it shut. And they pushed me. And I went right up to the edge there, and the water was, the ocean was getting me wet. And I want to read it because I can't say it right. I begin to walk toward the lead gray ocean. A gust buffets me and sends me spinning toward the seawall. I can hear the waves hollow and powerful smashing into the Malecon wall. I hug myself against the cold spray and stumble on toward the sea. And then, once more, I'm on the stern of the Guadalupe, afraid and without defenses. The ship is pulling me away from home. The ocean is yelling, jump, jump. At that instant, an enormous black wave crashes against the Malecon. The spray slaps me and pries open my throat. I hear my own scream. I didn't die. I'm alive. I didn't die. You didn't kill me. I came back. The book ends at the Toronto airport. I hear a voice calling me. It's my daughter, Carla. Mom, Mom, you're home.
Oh, no.
I will never do this again. It tears me apart every time I do this.
Well, thank you for doing it for us.
Yes.
We so appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's, any questions for Olga before we leave tonight?
I would just like to say, I've known Olga for 50 years.
How many?
50. And, well, he's known her longer, but, that's another story, but I admire you so much for how the memories of your family and your life in Cuba, kept you strong, and how you were able to tap into your inner strength to survive the terrible experiences really that you went through. I mean, I don't know what the question is, because how does one do that? Who knows? But
You would have survived them too.
but your inner strength, you've always been a very strong person. I admire you.
How about my buddies who are here? I see you hiding. No questions or comments?
Was your grandmother's house intact?
Good question. It was taken over in a very common way. People come to take care of an older person, and then they own the house. And they were there. They had sold everything. The house was empty. I don't know how they slept. And in her room, there used to be a picture of the Sacred Heart. And she and I would take naps together in her bed and listen to rock and roll. She would always say, turn it low, turn it down low a little. Bill Haley in the comments, yes. And there was no picture of, but what was there was an altar to an African god, Shango, and with a little cup of rum and a cigar, which are what he likes, underneath his picture. That's what was in the house. And they said they took care of her. I hope it's true.
You went to Harvard, right?
But see, Felipe?
I wanted to know about your language experience. I believe you went to an English school in Cuba, but when you came to the United States, like many immigrants, when they come, even though you've studied English, it's totally different when you're in completely English environment. How much of a struggle was that for you?
Should I tell the story about the swimming pool?
Sure.
Well, I went to an American school. It was a bilingual school. I recommend them for all your grandchildren and children. So I could speak, but not when somebody hits you like at the Woolworths cafeteria in Miami. how do you want your eggs, honey? Sunny side up over easy. What? And then on the ship, this little anecdote, I always try to find Americans so I can practice, And there were these guys standing there in seersucker. I knew if seersucker American. So they were wearing seersucker suits. And I went up and I said, I wanted to go swimming, and I wanted to know if the swimming pool had water in it. And I went up to them and I said, hello. And swimming pool in Spanish is
Piscina?
piscina. So I went up to them and I said, is the piscine pool open? From piscina, it made sense that it would be the piscine pool. Is the piscine pool open? Those poor guys, I don't know what they saw. I think they left quickly. So, it was, I could understand and I could speak, but it was too fast. And of course, the everyday things, that's all water over the dam kind of thing. And all the malapropisms you can think of, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you for bringing your story. As a Buffalo native and seeing an influx of immigrants, what can I do as a person who's been here my whole life, help them integrate into our community in an easier way? Because I can see them, and you want to encourage them, and it's just like, but I don't know how to help the immigrant find their way.
Well, the International Institute is a really good place if you would like to volunteer.
Yes. Okay.
Begin by saying hello.
Oh, that's me.
Right.
I walk the dog, so I know everything that's going, you know what I mean? I'm that neighborhood person. But I see a bigger influx.
Yes.
And for me, it's just like being a Buffalo native, but I've lived elsewhere, and I'm very proud of my community and what we offer here. There's so much. And it's like the language barrier. So it's kind of like, how do we help them communicate? How do we open the line of communication to them? I mean, I have a smiling face, so they don't, they're not standoffish.
Good.
They smile, but you can see there's that. But it's easy because I'll see the children riding bikes, and you can talk to them, and you get that link.
Yes.
You just say, it's so good to see you on your bike. And they understand that the English word is bike, and I think then they go back and say it to the parent that's sitting on the porch. Like,
Well,
you know what I mean?
there is a person here, well, of course, International Institute, if you belong to a church, they may be doing something.
Right.
And my friend Joni worked as a volunteer after school teaching or helping with homework for children from.
They were with God, my brain.
From country, what country were they from? Were they from?
From Africa.
From Africa.
I got my COVID brain still.
And Joni has to go in rain or snow. And Joni will be 85. Rain or snow, Joni was in her car driving.
My brain was working better then.
Driving to help them.
But their program doesn't exist anymore.
There's others.
People, I don't know if people are familiar with Global Villages, it's a store on Grand Street near Lafayette. Louise, she has all these things. She's from Rwanda originally. It's probably, even though she went through genocide, she's one of the happiest people I've ever met. She speaks 8 languages fluently, but really speaks about 11, including some clicking languages. And what she makes money by having wedding receptions and stuff like that for 300 people. But at her store, she's there every day, and it's a refugee community, and she bridges the gap for people who have a language that's really not spoken anywhere here. but because she knows so many, she does it. If you've never been to Global Villages, go introduce yourself to Louise. And if there's anything you want to ask about where somebody can be of help with something,
Excellent,
she's a ticket.
excellent. Yes,
I don't know if you ever heard this story, and you may have, Raul may have shared it with you, but he often would speak about how you were part of his recovery and therapy. Because that shooting was,
Raul,
yeah, his partner lost his voice, never got it back. So he used to tell stories about you, how you were part of his therapy and you helped him so much.
Michelle is a retired police officer. And she knew Raul Rusi. By the way, it's a very beautiful little anecdote. He was shot and they told him he would never walk again. Well, you don't tell Raul that, but at any rate, he went home. Sister Denise from the U called him. I don't even think she knew him. And said, so Raul, what are you going to do now with the rest of your life? You can't be a policeman. He said, I don't know, I have a family. And he said, why don't you come to the U? He said, well, sister, I have a family to support. She said, no, I mean to come for free. That's how Raul got his bachelor's degree. And she said, the only thing I ask is that if I ever invite you to speak, you will say yes.
Is that how Mary got you here?
I'm so glad you told me that. I didn't, you never told me that. We were like brother and sister. Yeah. I feel like I've told you my entire life.
No, I have a lot of questions and therefore we have to have lunch again because
Good.
I have a long list of questions.
And peanut soup
And peanut
downstairs.
soup, it's so good downstairs. So,
Thank you so much for
thank
coming.
you, thank you. Thank all of you for coming and we do meet the first Thursday of every month. It's on our website. The authors will be welcoming. We're so lucky to have put Olga in the place of someone who unfortunately had to, her health.
Attention virtual penny guests, the museum will be closing in 10 minutes.
So we flip-flop months and it worked out great and we're so delighted that you're here tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. May 16th is a special event with Susan Nussbaum, a poet who many of you I bet know, and will be right in this room. And she is going to do a book. Thank you, Michaela. She's going to be doing a book.
He's a lawyer.
Yes.
Yes, and she, like Olga said, this is the last time I'm doing this.
It is.
So please come out and hear her on the 16th. If it's a book launch, it's mid-month. But if it's a book that's been published and out for a little bit, it's the first Thursday of every month. So hopefully you'll join us on the 16th. Thank you. Thank you again.